It's not, it's the points.
That's because of cheaper overall.
Right.
No service. You know what I mean? You're spending you're spending 200-300 quid a month on fuel.
Okay, we've got quite a lot to do, so we'll start straight to. Okay, good evening.
Yeah, but the new testers don't come anymore.
Hardly, tiny bit towards the end.
No, we don't need it.
Tiny bit towards it. Okay, a lot of halachas, a lot of mishnah, a lot to do. We're up to Chof Beis Amud Beis, the mishnah at the bottom of the page. The perek is called Passive Voice. Passive Voice is a special colors which Chazal instituted in order for people to be able to drink a Leir Levega. We actually mentioned this very briefly before, that there's two kinds of wells. There's a pit where water accumulates, and there's a well where water springs forth. Where would you say Chazal be more makel? By a water pit or a well? Why?
There's always water.
There's more water. No, because there's more water. There's more water. And Chazal did it for water. If there's no water, Chazal never. Now, where would you permit it more? No, a public well or private well. Why?
Because that's how I did. That's how they
No, you're right. But you're right, public. No, because a public, we said it. A public well, people look after it and maintain it better and they make sure that it's constantly got water. Private ones, sometimes a person will run out of water.
The private one tends to be in a concert.
Both of them are. You're right, but you can. I mean, if you own a private, we talk about private one. I own it. Anyway, a well itself is Ushusay Yochid. We talk about the area around, but the well, again, Chazal were more likely to be maker by a well because it's got more water, and in a public one because things. And the Mishnah brings now two opinions regarding this whole topic. Mishnah is like this: Echod is Tanakamus of Akiva. Echod Boya Rabim, whether it's a water pit or Be'er Rabim. Or Be'er Yochid, or well of an individual, Oisin and passing. Avod the Boya Yochid, we've got both problems. First problem is only a water pit, it's not even a well. And second of all, it only belongs to an individual, not to the public, so it's easily going to run out of water. Then Oisin and Mechitza Gvei Asot, Tfachim Div Rabbi Akiva, then he's machbe, you have to make a wall of 10 Tfachim, and you cannot rely on passive voice. Yehuda ben Bava is much more machme. In Oisin passing the Be'er Rabim B'Vad, you have to have two things. It has to belong to the public, and it has to be a well. But if it's only an individual, or it's all water pit, even if it's for the public, and then you have to make proper strips, like at the height of level, the proper walls. You cannot rely on passive voice. You've got two different opinions. One Madama is Meiko, that either a well or the public, but Madama is Machne, there has to be both the well and the public. Says the Gemara of Gimel on the top of the page. Omar Ab Yosef, Omar Ab Yehuda, Omar Shmuel. Halacha Yehuda ben Bava. Halacha Yehuda ben Bava in our Mishnah, who is machme, if you remember. It has to belong to the public and it has to be a well. Omar Ab Yosef, Omar Ab Yehuda, Omar Shmuel. Lo Yehutu passive bivois ele be'emayim chayim belvat. Only for a well and not for a pit. Now you should be jumping down, up and down and shouting at me. What's the problem? That he said that halacha is like Yehuda ben Bava. By saying that halacha is like Yehuda ben Bava, he obviously, we know that it's only if it's a well and only if it's public. Why did you have to make another statement that it's only by a well? Once you said that halacha is like Yehuda ben Bava, you do not need to say anything further. No, it's not necessary. Moses says that tzvicha you need both, and the Moses says like this. Why? If you look very carefully at our Mishnah. No, but that's what it means. Be'e means be'emam chayim. I know I also wondered about that. Be'e is the opposite of boi. Boi is not boi mam chayim. Boi is just an accumulation of water, a place where you gather water. Boi is a pit. Be'e is a source of water. When the Mishnah says Rabbi Akiva came along and he was very mekel, either Be'e or Be'e Yochid. Or Be'e Yochid or boi. When Yehuda ben Bava argues, you could understand that he's arguing as follows. That by Be'e, you need Rabbim. But it could easily be that he holds that by boy, Rabbim would also be good. And what he meant was, you said that by Be'e, the individual works, for that I disagree with you. And I say that by Be'e, you need to have Rabbim. But you could understand that Yehuda ben Bava is not actually arguing by boy. Maybe he agrees that by boy it works. And the only reason he mentioned Be'e was to come and argue with Rabbi Akiva, that you, Rabbi Akiva, said that Be'e works whether it belongs to the public or it belongs to the individual. I say no. I say that a well only works if it belongs to the public, but a boy maybe also works. So what's the I would have thought always anything belongs to the public is okay. Why did he mention the well? That to exclude Rabbi Akiva who said that a well of individuals is okay. Therefore, you had to come along and say no. Yehuda ben Bava meant only wells. Now, if you would say the second statement only, if it only said Yehuda ben Bava, you would misunderstand what Yehuda ben Bava said. And you would think that Yehuda ben Bava was only coming to try and tell you that you're not allowed to do a well of individual. But you wouldn't know what's halacha regarding a pit. Therefore, you had to add the second. Adam Shmuel only taught us that you need to have a well. I would have thought either one is good, either a public one or individual. So let's summarize. Shmuel wanted to be machmir that you need to have both things. You need to have a well and it needs to belong to the public. The Gemara now says, why did you have to say two statements? Just say that Allah is like a Yehuda ben Bava. No. If you say just say that Allah is like a Yehuda ben Bava, you could still understand that Yehuda ben Bava has only argued Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said that well works whether it's individual or public. He says, no, by a well you need the public. But you don't know what the halacha would be by a pit. Maybe a pit of a public would work. Therefore, we should have to add that. And if we only said the second bit, that the halacha is you have to have a well, you wouldn't know a well of the public or individual. So therefore, he said both statements, and now we know that he holds like a Yehuda ben Bava, that you have to have a well and of the public, and that Yehuda ben Bava holds that a pit doesn't work at all. This is the end, basically, of the halachas of passive divorce. The Gemara now moves on to Kalf. The reason it's continued, if you remember, the first mission now picked was an argument how big passive divorce can be. And the Gemara said that Yehuda held that it's only allowed, not Yehuda Steinberg, Yehuda by it is, that only up to base or sign, because Yehuda understood there's no difference between that and all other kalfim. So if you allow anything more than base or sign, you'd come to allow kalf more base or sign. So from now we're going to go to halachas of kalf. Kalf is a gzeira d'Rabbanan. That if you've got an area which is not properly enclosed, not properly lived in, people look at it as Rosh Hashanah. Somebody told me, I never knew this, just today, Joseph Rapport came in King's Road, there's like a little park. To measure it, is it a base assignment? It's opposite base Modcha, a bit further along, closer to where the school is. Whether it's a base assignment. You worked out to Kod Chaznish, it's not to Kod Chaznish, not. Oh, kids playing. This is the discussion. Regarding Kalfaf, there are three things that you have to decide regarding Kalfaf. It's quite complicated. It's got, the question is it a good fence, etc.?
Yeah, we discussed this.
We'll discuss it. Okay, let's go. That's what I was told today. Now, there are three things to define a kalf. First of all, is it what's called mukaf ledira? That means, is it living or not living? And over here, we have to rely on what Chazal called living. For example, planting vegetables, that's not called living in, right? But using it to guard your animals is considered living. So the question is it mukaf ledira or not? Is it enclosed for living or not living? That's question number one. Question number two is how big. There are some who hold that any size is okay as long as it's got good wall. Some hold no, it has to be smaller. There's a question of the size. And third of all, the question of the shape. There's three different arguments regarding kalfaf. What is a kalfaf? One regarding its size, one regarding what it's being used for, and one regarding what its shape is. Does it have to be a square? Can it be a rectangle? Meaning like this. You can have an enclosure. This is what we spent once mentioned. You can have somewhere which is fenced in, completely fenced in. But it's, let's say, used as a vegetable plot. And you've got a proper wall. Proper wall around it. A real wall. The best wall you can ever imagine. But because it's used for a vegetable plot, so therefore it's not lived. And therefore, if a person goes inside it, and he got inside it, so he wants to carry from one end of the vegetable plot to the other end, with the Rabban on it is awesome. Oh, very good. That's a good question. So the answer will be, because that's a hukah fledira. Like, what do you do in your garden? Right. This is a big discussion. That we'll see. This is what. You don't keep animals in your garden. Yes. Oh, you keep going. Okay. So you've got three questions. You've got to decide what's a kalfa. Size, what it's enclosed for, and shape. It's interesting. There's a lot of halachas regarding the shape. The Mishnah says like this. Another thing Yehuda ben Bob says. What was the last thing Yehuda ben Bob said? Anybody remember? Very good. And Shivak. Another thing he said, Hagina ba'karfaf, a garden, vegetable plot in a karfaf. I'm going to stick with the word karfaf because I don't know a good English word. It's an enclosure. Shein shivin amar v'shivayim al shivin amar v'shivayim, which is 70 and a bit more, and 70 by a bit more. We must remember, we said that most people, most shittas hold that karfaf is a problem once it's more than the base of sign. Base of sign is how many square meters? 5,000, which is squared. Wow. Actually, Rashi says it's 7.67. We'll come to it in the poems. I'm very happy that you remembered it because I didn't remember it. Oh, fans, you said 70.71. And here it's really, we'll see. Oh, very good. Kids, we'll see. We'll come to it. No, you can't. Rashi talks about this problem. 70.67. Right. So again, which is 70 by 70. V'shivayim, a little bit more than 70. Hamukafa is geder gevoi asor tefachim. And it's got a proper wall, 10 tefachim high. Can you imagine? You've got a proper wall. But it's a vegetable plot. Metaltlim b'seichi you're allowed to because it's only based on Simon, not more. But he had another condition. What's his condition? One of the three things. Either you've got a guard's hut inside it, or you've got a living space. It's open up to a house, like your back garden which opens up to your house, or it's close to the city. So according to Yehuda ben Baba, to permit a karfaf to carry inside it, you need two conditions. One is that it's less than Beis Yosayim, less than 5,000 square meters. If you've got a very, very big garden, according to Yehuda ben Baba, what would that halacha be? According to Yehuda ben Baba, you've got a very big back garden. What's that halacha? No. Because he said if it's book of if it's then it's based here, it's okay. But over here, Rashi says that means up to 70 by 70, it's okay if you've also got the base deer thing. No, it's got Isadra Bonnie not allowed to carry it. Let's see Rashi inside. The words of Rashi. This is the first Rashi. Shemira Sukkah Shemin. It's the first Rashi on the Mishnah. It's a very big headache. Shvat gets very upset about this halacha. That it means, according to this, if you've got a very, very big garden and it's open up to your house, you can't carry. We don't pass like this, but I'll just give it again. I want to get, what did Yehuda ben Baba say? Two halachas. We said there are three things to consider: the shape, the size, and the use. He's saying something which has got a proper use, plus it's the size of less than base, so to its base of time, it is mutter. Rabbi Yehuda argues with him, that's Rabbi Yehuda by Eloi. You don't need to have such a good usage, even if it's got less. That means it's only got a well, or a cave, or a pit. That's also good enough. And Rashi explains that according to Rabbi Yehuda, not Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, if it's got a real house opening up into it, then even more than base of sign would be mutter. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, if you've got a very big house, a very big garden opening up into your house, it's okay. Rabbi Akiva argues you don't need not a well, not a guard, not opening up into a house, as long as it's based on sign. So let's just examine one point. We said the karfaf, there are three questions. What's its use? Regarding the use, we have three opinions. The most machne is Yehuda ben Baba, that you have to have a proper use opening to your house next to the city. The most maker is Rabbi Akiva, who says you don't have to have a use at all. No use at all, it's okay. Regarding Rabbi Yehuda, he's in between. It's got to have some use, a well, a pit, but not a very good use. So it's three opinions.
It doesn't matter about size.
No, okay, so he splits it. If you've got a well, then up to base of sign. If it's not got a well, if it's got a house opening up to it, even more than base of sign. Not got a well, then even not base of sign would be awesome. It's quite a lot to remember. Again, let's go to simplify things. Regarding the use, we have three opinions. Shittas Rabbi Akiva, it doesn't have any use at all. Shittas Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba has to have a good use. Rabbi Yehuda a light use. But now, carries on Rabbi Akiva. But the size must be 70 by 70 square. If you've got a base of sign, but the shape is not square, but rather it's a rectangle, meaning that the length of this one side is an amma long. It doesn't need to be in a rectangle, it's slightly rectangular, then you're not allowed to carry in the karfaf. Even if the length is twice the width, So here we're discussing the shape, and here we've got three opinions. Well, we're more discussing this. We've got two so far in the Mishnah which are clear. There's one which is hidden. One opinion is it doesn't matter if it's longer than it's wider. The other opinion is it has to be exactly square. But this is talking about a karfuf which is not hukaf ledira, which is not meant for proper living space. So let's say, for example, you've got a vegetable plot, and you've got it, and let's say it's more than twice, it's very long and thin, because the BC only permits twice the length of the width. Let's say it's 3 times the length of the width, right? Let's say it's 200 amas long, 25 amas wide, which is 5,000 square amas. According to BC, that would also be awesome. And therefore, even if you've got a proper wall around it, you will not be allowed to carry this vegetable plot. Why? Because it's not hukaf ledira, it's a garden. Now, comes along Rabbi Loz, Omar Beloy. Shomati Rabbi Loz, it's supposed to be Rabbi Lezer. This is Rabbi Lezer. He heard 3 halachas from Rabbi Lezer, which we don't agree with any of the 3. And he said, I remember hearing it from Rabbi Lezer, but nobody ever heard it besides for him. What did he hear from Rabbi Lezer? 3 halachas. I feel we could base score. One color, we talked about the size. Till now, we said, what's the biggest a karfuf can be based on size? Comes along, Rabbi Lezer, no, even if it's the size of a core, it's okay. Second thing, this is good if we discuss the great sense later. We'll just say very briefly like this. Let's say we all own a home, each one of us in this room, and it all opens up into one big chutzah. So the right thing to do on Friday afternoon is what? Gather matzah from all of us, or be makna matzah to all of us, make an Eiruvin, and then all of us are allowed to carry from my garden to my house, from your garden to my house, everything, because it's all one big house into one garden. Let's say you all did it except for me. I forgot. I was not included in the Eiruvin. So the Yashus halacha should be that what? Since I own a part of the chutzah, so that chutzah partly belongs to me, partly belongs to all the rest of you that made the Eiruvin. So the chutzah is like a joint possession, me and everybody else. So nobody's allowed to carry that Shabbos from their house into the chutzah. Because let's say you carry from your house into your chutzah, you're carrying from your house belongs to you. The chutzah belongs to you and me. So it's a shared property. So it's like carrying from Rishus Yachid a little bit to Rishus Hashanah. It's not mamish, it's Midu Abanon. So now it's a big problem. Everybody will be very annoyed. Hey, because of you, full sport, we've got no air of this Shabbos. So we do something called Bittul Rishus. So Allah will come to Bittul Rishus. Bittul Rishus means that I pretend as if my property does not belong to me. So now you're all allowed to carry, because I have no ownership whatsoever. Says Rabbi Loi in the name of Rabbi Lezer that you're even allowed to carry from my house into the chutzah. Why are you allowed to carry from my house into the chutzah? Because I don't own my house anymore. So therefore, my house belongs to the community, to everybody else, and therefore it's all one big property. It's fine. But I'm not allowed to carry. Why am I not allowed to carry? When I carry from my house into my chutzah, I'm demonstrating that I consider it to be my property. And therefore that the bittul rishus is not really true. And therefore I'm forbidden to carry. So I'm not allowed to carry from my house into my chutzah. So the whole Shabbos I will not be able to carry from my house to my chutzah. I'll be able to carry in my house, but not out of my house. But the rest of you will be able to carry from your house to the chutzah, and even from my house into the chutzah. That is the idea of bittul rishus. The more later discuss it. Can you do bittul rishus one person though? What? I think actually the Gemara discussed that even much later. Okay, the value of the Gemara holds not. So that's the second halacha. The first halacha you heard that karfuf could be the size of a kol, which we said sometimes the size bigger. The second halacha is bittul rishus, and the third halacha, that the Gemara in Pesachim tells us there are 5 kinds of mor. He added a 6th, something called akabelin. I don't know the English word for it, but it's a kind of bitter spice, herb. And I looked for somebody to support my opinion. I didn't find. Nobody agreed with me, and therefore nobody supported me. It needs to be halacha. Imagine I say I heard from so far halacha, and you say, what do you mean? I've been hearing the Shiur for 20 years. I never heard that halacha. So it makes what I say a bit suspicious. That's what the Gemara says. Okay. So the Gemara is like this. The Gemara first discusses just the first word of the Mishnah, va'oid, furthermore. Va'oid means that this is a continuation. And the Gemara is bothered that not always does the Tana start off and also. Va'oid means it's a continuation. What way is a continuation? And you pointed out correctly that Yehuda ben Bava came along with a chumrah in the last Mishnah. What was his chumrah? That you need to be a well for the public and it has to be a well, not a bit. And now is it machmir again. It says, well, my Tana, diktani void. What did it say previously that you say now void? You said one chumrah in the previous Mishnah, you said another one. Is that why you say void? Rabbi Yehuda, the first two Mishnahs in our parak, Rabbi Yehuda says two chumras. One in the first Mishnah and one in the second Mishnah. Does anybody remember the first chumrah? The first chumrah was that you are not allowed to do a passive voice more than sosayim. And another one is that if the public walk through the passive voice, you have to move them to the side. That's the two chumras in the first two Mishnahs in our Mishnah. First chumrah is you can't do passive voice more than a sign. And the second chumrah is you can't have the public walking through passive voice. It says, well, it doesn't say void. So why are we here to say void there not? So it says, look, there, if you remember, they interrupted him. When he said, you're not allowed to do passive voice more than two sosayim, what did the Chachamim say to him? Why is this different from any other garden that we're allowed to do more than sosayim? And the answer that there's a difference there is a proper was not here. But they got into an argument. Once they got into interruption, you can't say void. Says the Gemara. So they says, when there's interruption, we don't say void. Rabbi Lezer says two halachas in Sukkah. What's the two halachas? The famous halachas of Rabbi Lezer in Sukkah. No. Oh, how many meals? And what's he say? You have to have a minimum of 14 meals. And a very, very big chiddush. That what? That if you didn't eat in the Sukkah, first night Sukkahs, you eat the first night Shmini Atzeres, and you're yotzei, you make up for first night Sukkah. Never heard such a chiddush. And there he does say v'oid, even though he's interrupted, because after he says you have to have 14 meals, the Chachamim say to him, no, you don't. You only have to have one meal the first night. After that, you can eat in the Sukkah, or you just decide not to eat, or eat just water and bread and potatoes and never eat in the Sukkah again. So he says v'oid, even though he's interrupted. So again, let's go very briefly. Not in that Mishnah, maybe the Gemara. Okay, it does say void, it makes it even worse. Let's get it clear again. The Gemara says like this. Here it says void. The Gemara says, okay, because it says void. The previous Mishnah said the Chumrah, here it's void. Ben Yehuda said void, it said two Chumras, we never said void. What says there he was interrupted? Ben in Sukkah he was interrupted, and it does say void. Answers the Gemara. Again, let's go inside. When they interrupted him regarding what he was arguing. He said 14 meals, they said 1 meal. Once they go into argument, they mentioned something else. They said to him, not just by passive voice, we hold you allowed to have more than that to sow, but we hold that even when it comes to a garden or a place you want to fertilize your sheep, you are your field, or you want to guard your sheep, in all these cases, you're allowed to do more than base or sign. So therefore, since they interrupted him and they got into another discussion, so therefore that's how we don't say v'oid. So briefly, we say v'oid whenever a person says two chumras one after the next, even if he's interrupted, unless the interruption leads us onto a new topic. Okay. Says the word like this. Akiva says, even if it does not have any of these things, meaning it doesn't have a well, it doesn't have a house opening into it, you're allowed to carry as long as it is base sosayim squared. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva Hanu Tana Kama. That means the first Tana in our Peruk, Rashi explains, when he would argue with Rabbi Yehuda and he said to him that passive work can be more than base, so he said to him, only a kalfov can be base sosayim, but other things can be more. So therefore, he obviously was saying that anything which is for living space can be much more than base sosayim. A kalfov has to be limited to base sosayim. So Rabbi Akiva said that a kalfov is limited to base sosayim. Rabbi Akiva is saying the same thing as a Tana Kama. As what ikibanayu dava mort. Oh, the nafkimina which should be antari. What's nafkimina? I said that how big can a kalfov be is 70.67. Because when we say shirayim, we mean 2/3, which is a little bit more than 70 points and 2/3. But if the Chachamim, they hold that even more than that, they hold 70.712, which is slightly bigger. The reason why Rabbi Akiva says less, we said base sosayim, he felt that Chazal wanted to round it off. Rounding it off to 70 and 2/3, that's a proper number. Right, 70 and 2/3. 70 hours and 2/3 by 70 hours by 2/3. That's the size. Oh, base of time is slightly more, because if you do 70 and 2/3 times 70 and 2/3, it doesn't come to 5,000. It comes 449. Oh, very good. 4994. I had to memorize that. How did you do it?
I tried it now.
Oh, very good. I thought you had a good mathematical brain. 70.2 2/3 times 70 2/3 comes to 4994, 6 amas less than 5,000 square meters. Rabbi Akiva held you're only allowed to have that size. The Chachamim held a little bit more. That's the difference between them. So when we talk about the size of a kalfa, we've got Rabbi Akiva who says 70.23. The Chachamim say 71.2. What did you say? 70.712. And you've got Shittas Rabbi Lezer at the end of the Mishnah that says even the base score is okay. The Tanya, we have a Bryce that explains this. There's slightly more than 70 and 2/3. The Chacham did not didn't explain it because they didn't want to get into the delicate numbers and they preferred to stick to the 70.2 and 2/3. The Kama Shiur, so Sam Kechotza Mishkan. The Shiur is like the Chotza Mishkan, which was 100 amas by 50, 5,000 square amas, which is squared, is 70 something square amas. We know immediately where do we see the idea that base of Sam is the defining number? This pasuk has a question which is glaring obvious. The pasuk is describing us the sides of the Mishkan. So you've got the Mishkan, which was the actual building where you had the curtains and you had inside the Oven, the Shulchan and Noah. And then you had the chotza of the Mishkan, the courtyard of the Mishkan. How big was the courtyard of the Mishkan? 100 by 50. So let's see what the pasuk says. The length of the chotza 100. That's very good. 100. The width should be 50 by 50. It's a very strange thing to say. Imagine I say to you, the length of this room is 100. The width is 50 by 50. I said, what do you mean about 50 by 50? There's no such thing. 50 by 50. The length is 100, the width is 50. You don't say the width is 50 by 50. That doesn't make any sense at all. So the Gemara asks a kasha. Omot Torah, Tul Chamishim v'Sovev Chamishim. And here you have a very long Rashi. And it's actually, they made a picture out of it. But I don't know, nowadays the picture will help us so much. The picture is number Kuf Tzadi and Kuf Tzadi Aleph. Have you got the picture book? Kuf Tzadi Aleph. Basically like this. If you wanted to take 100 times 50, and that's 5,000 square meters, and make it a square, what would you do? Most of us would take out the calculator and just do it with a calculator. In the olden days, we didn't have calculators. Those who have brains and want to think. How would you do it? Again, you've got 100 by 50, and you want to make it a square, not a rectangle. What would you do?
Two 50s by 50s.
How would you do that? How would that work? If you cut the length in half, so you got 50 by 50. But you want to make it, but you want to make it a square. I hear what you're saying. But you want to make it a square of the full size. You don't want to make it a square of 50 by 50. You want 150 to change 100 times 50. Oh, 25 is not mathematically exactly. So Rashi tells us at a very long length how to do it. Look at the pictures. Kuf Tzadik Aleph, those who've got the picture. Is what you do is like this. You take the 50 by 50 and you leave it. And then what you do is you take the other 50 by 50 and you cut it into strips. First into 4 big strips, which is 50 by 10, and you add them to the sides. Then you cut it into smaller strips and you add those strips to fill in the corners, which is gaps. And then even thinner strips to put it all around, and you'll come to 70.712 or 70.2. Again, the Torah says that the length of the Mishkan was 100 by 50 by 50, so it's 100 by 50, to tell you that there's a reason over here. We want you to take the 50 and add 50 to it to make it a square. How do you add 50 to make it a square? You take the second 50, cut it into strips. You add both pictures into it, Tolly. Yeah. So if you look in the second picture and you look in the first picture, you see you cut it into little strips, and then you add the little strips around, and there's a very, very long Rashi to describe exactly how you do it. I'm not going to go into it because nowadays we don't do maths like that. There's a Rashi in Rashbam Bava Basra that goes to a very long Rashbam how to measure base core, and it goes to you cut it this way. Because nowadays we're used to multiplying, especially because we've got calculators and everything else. But if you needed to really get down to it and have to square it off, it won't be so easy. So this is the way to do it. Says the Gemara, Pasha de Kobe Mike say, what's the posture in the pasuk? Meaning like this. The chotzer of the Mishkan was 100 by 50. But in front of the Mishkan, there was a 50 by 50 space without anything except for Mizbeach and the Kir inside, no Mishkan inside it. So the end of the Mishkan actually finished at the end of the 50. The article got a very nice picture of it. Yeah, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, put the picture of the article on. Very good. And in that way, you've got it. Basically, what you do is, you've got 100 by 50. The Mishkan began after you went in 50. Then the Mishkan began. Now, the Mishkan was 30. So how much was at the back of the Mishkan? Very good. How much was the sides of each side? Very good. The Gemara says 20. Article say 90. Why? Work it out. The Mishkan was 30, but the thickness of the wall was an amma. So the Meiri already says 20 include, actually was 20 included the walls. So let's get it very clear. The Torah says 50 by 50. Better it's an asmachta, because the Holy Sarah of a Kalfa is Eiruvin to Rabbanon. The Pasuk Pshat and Pasuk Vashiela Torah tells us is that the Mishkan was 100 by 50, meaning that there was a place which was 50 by 50 empty of the Mishkan. And therefore, around the Mishkan was 20. If you think about it, it's more grand like that. When you go to Buckingham Palace, in front of Buckingham Palace, there's a huge plaza. And then behind it, there's much smaller. You don't need it. So you came into the Mishkan, it was a whole big area. And then you have the Mishkan, which was 30 by 10. And then behind it was 20 on each side. That was, you had it. Sheikh, the front Mishkan was 50 by 50. That's Bosham Shah. Says the Gemara. Okay. The Mishnah says, the Belezer says, now we've discussed the usage of the we discussed the usage. What's the usage? 3 opinions. We passed it, by the way, you have to have no usage whatsoever. We discussed the size. No usage at all, it's also
It's the most coloured.
most correct. Now, regarding the size, we have different shiurim, kol, beisam, etc. Now we're going to have the shape. Now, in our Mishnah, Rabbi Lezer says, the posh pshat of Mishnah is that if it's 1 amma longer than it is wider, then it's no longer mutter if it's a cow. But only if it's more than double its width, not like what we just said, only if it's more than double the width. And our Mishnah, it says only if it's the length is more than the width. Here it says if the length is more than double the width. Now the Mishnah means more than double the width. That means when the Mishnah says it shouldn't be longer than wider, it means it shouldn't be longer than double the width. That's exactly what Rabbi Yossi says later. According to Rabbi Yossi, a calf should be a square. If it's not a square, it's okay. According to Rabbi Lezer, even it doesn't need to be a square, as long as it's not more than double the width. That means as long as the length is not more than double the width, it's okay. So it comes out like this. Rabbi Akiva holds it has to be exactly a square. Rabbi Lezer holds it doesn't have to be a square, it could even be double the width. Rabbi Yossi holds preferably make it a square, but if it's a rectangle, that's also okay. Says Rabbi Yossi, Shmuel said that Allah is like Rabbi Yossi, was makel that you can have the length double the width. Allah is like Rabbi Akiva that is makel that what? That you don't need to have any usage for a kalfa, even if it's got no well, as long as it's based on sign, and as long as it's got a wall, you're allowed to carry that. But both of them are being makel. Meaning, he passes Rabbi Akiva passes 2 things. Rabbi Akiva said it has to be a square, and it doesn't have to have a usage. So when Shmuel passed like Rabbi Akiva, he meant I'm only passing like half of Rabbi Akiva. And passing like Rabbi Akiva lekula, that it doesn't need to have a usage. But regarding the shape, I'm passing like Rabbi Yossi, that it doesn't need to be a square. So like this. Which Rabbi lekula, if in the past like Rabbi Yossi that you don't need it to be a square, have a min out said, oh, if you hold like Rabbi Yossi, everything like Rabbi Yossi. Adika Shmir based dira. Like Rabbi Yossi said in the beginning of the Mishnah, that it has to have a use for it. It has to have maybe like a rhythm and baba, that it has to have a use for it. Akiva that has no use. Only if it is if it's long and narrow, it's no good. So that's how we pass them. So if somebody comes to you and says to you, I have a vegetable plot, then you have to say to someone like this: vegetable plot, no use. So it's a calf. Is he allowed to carry inside it? So the first thing you have to do is measure. If it's more than base of sign, you're going to have to say, I'm very sorry, you cannot carry in this, even if it's got a wall I'm talking about. Not always got no wall, even if it's got a wall. If it has a wall and it's base of sign, you're okay. Doesn't matter which shape it is, as long as it's not more than the width, the length is not more than double the width. So there are three things you have to measure when you've got an enclosure. It's quite a big hummus you're thinking about over here. So if you've got, for example, an area, for example, as I said, to the left of you suffer this a lot, they struggle with this a lot. But what would happen is people will be, you buy a plot of Matisau and start building. So people don't enclose it. So for it to be permitted to carry within, he said, what would happen is, he told me that children, Shabbos afternoon, would get bored. And they would use these empty plots to play, what do you say, rugby, cricket, or something exciting, a good sport. What's a good sport? Football. No, hide and seek will be a problem because it's not carrying.
You need something.
Which they're carrying. And he would say to them, it's forbidden. Why is it forbidden? Because unless it's got all three parameters, if it's got a proper wall around it, and it's less than base of sign, and the length is not more than double the width, you'd be allowed to carry inside it. But often they won't have all of these things, and therefore you won't be able to carry. Oh, a nice big football pitch would be forbidden to carry.
And you can't play football.
You can't play football in it.
Can't play football anyway.
Well, no, it depends if you're nervous.
Yes, that's what I was trying to explain. But in a kalfa, it doesn't help. An Eiruvin does not help for a kalfa. Because an kalfa is not hookah for deer.
Well, you already
Yes.
that cross.
No, it's zero.
Wait a second. The Maccabi, can you carry in Maccabi?
What?
No, Maccabi's much smaller. You're talking about the one with the actual.
No, the back over here, the back of that road, Castle Hill.
Yeah, but they're real. The back of.
Yeah.
There's two pitches. There's open grass, and then there's in
No,
a
it's
pitch.
too big.
Massive.
It's too big.
There's two things. There's grass, and then there's also a pitch you can rent.
Oh, and they've got those in Maccabi's hand.
No.
I tell you what it is. It could be that it opens up into a building, and it's not considered empty land.
You're not allowed to use it. Then.
I have to ask Dan Steiner. Mind me, I want to ask Dan Steiner.
The two pitches are much bigger.
Within the calf, you can't carry.
Even if you use
them. Yeah, no, but I'm saying, but maybe it's not a calf because maybe. That's right. If it's calf, then it doesn't help because you can't carry within the calf.
No, because Maccabi's
What?
also open area. What?
So maybe because it's considered diva, maybe it's considered living space. Maybe it's not considered calf.
Why would
Maccabi to be no good.
Maccabi consider?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I don't have to ask that. I didn't. Well, I was thinking this was a left's place. Was Shabbat itself. Something which is not hookah for diva, something which is not used for living space. So
why is Borden Park different? The park itself different to?
So basically, they hold that is considered a living space. Zev Leff was telling me that we discussed many times. Is that these new building plots were not hookah for diva. They're not these living there yet. It's like a ruins or like it's like
the building in Maccabi. Doesn't the building in Maccabi make that?
Oh, that's I don't know. That's what we have to verify.
So
People eat that.
No, what's it? It's not. It's not. It shouldn't. That's what I'm saying.
But we see that a vegetable plot is not visible.
Again, how do you define a cow?
That's right.
So there was a code, the shortcut, which is no, it's not really.
No, they
flat.
stopped it off.
And this is much more.
It used to be able to walk through
Okay,
it.
but now it's not there anymore.
Yeah. Okay, we have to check it out. Actually, that's okay.
Locked it off.
Now the Gemara's got one Gemara.
Anything, this should be also not.
Why? What?
This area here, no, the carpet.
Oh, I thought you were talking about
Car pub is hookah for deer. People live in there. It's considered it's part of the. No, but it's closed off from the Makalfa, but it's part of the. It's like a garden. Okay, I want to get to the next one. Okay, yeah. Let's look at the next one. Next one is a bit of a cheshbon. Let's get it clear. Let's see what's going to outside. Imagine you've got a 5 sa'ah plot of land. 5 sa'ah. So if it's hukaf lediva, are you allowed to carry in it, or yes or no? It's got a wall lediva. You're allowed to carry in it, yes or no? Yeah.
Depends on the shape, size.
Hukaf lediva, yes. Are you allowed to carry it? We said only a calf. Hukaf lediva, if it's for living, you're allowed to carry it. If you decide to plant vegetables there, you will not be allowed to carry it, even if it's hukaf. Why? Because it's 1 and 2 saw. Once it's 1 and 2 saw, yeah, that's why. Once it's, if it's, the world tells us that when you plant trees, people can still live there because people are comfortable to walk around the trees, to sit between the trees. If you plant vegetables, people can't live there because people can't walk around. So if you got a 5 saw plot of land and you plant trees all over, it's okay because it's hukaf l'diva. You plant vegetables, it's no good. What happens if you plant half of it vegetables and half of it you leave empty? So now, the area which you leave empty is hukaf l'diva, should be okay. The area which is which is planted, so that if the area is more than base society, let's say you planted 3 saw of vegetables, would you be allowed to carry in the vegetable area? You shouldn't be allowed to. Of course not. Why not? Because that part is not hukaf l'diva, because you can't live there, you can't live amongst the vegetables. And it's more than base 2 saw, so therefore your hukaf is no good. If it's less than 2 saw, let's say you only plant 1 saw for vegetables, then it's okay. You've got one area which is mutter because it's hukaf l'diva, the 4 saw, and one area which is okay because even though it's hukaf l'gina, and we said gina is like a kalfaf, but at the end of the day it's less than base of Simon. It's got wall around, it's okay. Now here we come to a very interesting machlokes which comes up a lot in Eiruvin, and that is like this: midrabanan, you're not allowed to carry from your house to your garden because the garden, the chotzer, is considered. Let's say from my house to my chotzer, I'm not allowed to carry because my chotzer is shared with me and all the rest of it. Would I be allowed to carry from my roof, which is, let's say, shared with a few people, to a garden? That's a very big machlokes. I did very shortly in Shabbos, and that is like this: Shittas Tanakama is not. Why not? A roof is a different kind of usage to a chotzer. So therefore, even if one person owns the roof, and the same person owns the chotzer, you can't carry from the roof to the chotzer. Because the kind of things you do on the roof and the kind of things you do on the chotzer are separate. It's as if it's two separate issues. But Shimon goes to the other extreme, and he says that not only if it belongs to the same person, but even if it belongs to different people, that means you're allowed to carry. So I'm allowed to carry from my roof into your chotzer, or from my roof into your kalfaf. The reason is because it's not proper usage. It's such random and such rare usage, the roof, that Chazal never forbade from one to the other. Going back to our case, if you've got a big plot of land, 5 saw, and let's say 4 of it is hukaf l'diva, fine. But one of it is I put vegetables there. Would I be allowed to carry from one to the other? According to Shimon, yes. According to the Chachamim, maybe not. Why not? Because since the hukaf of the garden part is become mutter only because it's less than B'Sur Simon, it's considered the kaf, and the other part is hukaf l'diva, so it's like 2 separate areas. Who said they're allowed to carry from inside? This is all the Gemara's class. I'll just sit outside. Let's go inside. Kaf of Shiur B'Sur Simon. A kaf of which is more than 2 saw, shehukaf l'diva, which was surrounded the diva so far, you're allowed to carry it. Nizra rubo, if most of it was planted as vegetation, how could gina v'asa? Not have we planted trees, how could chotzer mutter? Because you can still work with trees, you can still sit there, you can still relax there, etc. Nizra rubo, only if you planted more than B'Sur Simon mutter. If you planted B'Sur Simon, it is mutter. Why? Because the B'Sur Simon is mutter because it's a vegetable plot. And even if there's another saw, let's say, which is not a vegetable plot, the other saw, for example, is empty, but that's mutter because it's hukaf l'diva. So you can carry from the vegetable plot to the hukaf l'diva. Keman kab Shimon. It has to fit in like Shimon. Anything which was left when Shabbos came in the garden, I'm allowed to carry to the roof. From the roof to the kaf. Anything which when Shabbos came in was inside the house, then I'm not allowed to take it to the garden, and I'm not allowed to take it to the roof, etc. Because then I'm actually taking it from one area to another. Says Rav Shimon Nami, Kimi de this Abubi, have a umuta, top of Dalad Dalek, bottle the Gabu, about a cup of yes, also. Imagine the whole area is, let's say, 3 saw now. 2 saw I planted as a garden. So now I'll say to myself, the 2 saw that I planted, that's mutter. Why is it mutter? Because it's 2 saw, which is mutter with its hukaf l'gina. The 1 saw is also fine because it's hukaf l'dia. No. Why? Since 2/3 of it is planted as vegetation, we look at the whole thing as a garden plot. And if the whole thing is a garden plot, how big is this garden plot? 3 saw. And 3 saw, even if it's hukaf, it's awesome because a kalfa which is hukaf is no good, even if it's 3 saw. Answers, even if it's hukaf. When the minority is planted, it's okay. Also, once it's based on it is also command kirabonon. Meaning like this: if you've got a vegetable plot which the minority is planted, like then and 2 sa'ah is a vegetable place, so that 2 sa'ah is considered a kalfuf. The rest of it, let's say the other 3 sa'ah, is considered hukaf ledira. Carrying from one to the other is forbidden. Why? Because you're carrying from a kalfuf to a hukaf ledira. But according to Rabbi Shimon, to be okay. Rav Yehuda different master lekula. He says lekula. Yuta shoy. I'm going to be Rav Sholi. I'm going to be Sosaim. I'm Yosef Sosaim. Also, if it's more than based Sosaim, it is also. Why is it also if it's more than based Sosaim? Command Rav Shimon. That fits in according to Rav Shimon, because Rav Shimon holds that anything which is more than based Sosaim is considered is no more kalfa, and therefore it's also. If it's exactly based Sosaim, it would be mutar. Let's just look at the pictures. The pictures got major help, but it'll give us a little bit of a reference point. So you've got picture Kuf Tzadik base and Kuf Tzadik Gimel. Very, very few pictures. So Kuf Tzadik base, what you should hopefully see is bushes. Kuf Tzadik Gimel, what you hopefully can see is trees. I can't see so much the difference, but perhaps you can. So now, in the case of Kuf Tzadik Gimel, where it's trees, and you can see it's Hukaf Ledira. How can you see it's Hukaf Ledira? If you look very carefully, there's a house opening up into the back garden. So it's Hukaf Ledira. People are living there. So therefore, in the Kuf Tzadik Gimel, where it's Hukaf Ledira and you planted trees, it says okay. Why is it okay? Trees don't spoil it. And the house makes it Hukaf Ledira, so that's okay. In Kuf Tzadik base, so now, in this case, the Gemara, the Maskana holds, the Kuf Tzadik base, you're not allowed to carry anywhere. Why? Because even if the Beis Sosayim would be mutter, because Beis Sosayim, which is hukaf, is okay. But since it's roiv of it is planted, so therefore we look at it as if the whole thing is planted. We go after roiv. If roiv is a vegetable plot, so now you've got an area which is more than Beis Sosayim as a vegetable plot. And we said that a calf of the maximum size of a calf can be is Beis Sosayim, so it's no good. So therefore, all we're left with is awesome. If let's say you only planted a less than half, then it would be okay. Now, carrying from one to the other, it would depend if you hold like Shimon on the Chachamim. If you have exactly Beis Sosayim, which according to the Chachamim, which makes it that one side is a Mukaf Ledira, and one side is a Kalfa, carrying from one to the other is Machlik is upon Shimon. Did Chazal institute the Issa D'Rabbanan not only from the house to a Chotzer, but also from different kinds of gardens into each other? Okay, we'll stop here. We have to define Kalfuf better. I don't know, as I said to you right at the beginning, we have to rely on Chachamim. I personally, for example, would say that a garden of vegetable plot is Hukaf L'Dir. And that putting it for animals to look after the animals is not Hukaf L'Dir. The Gemara says the other way around. So we have to establish what nowadays is called Hukaf L'Dir. What did you say? A compound, yeah, but it's very hard to describe. Let's say, for example, a Maccabi playfield. Is that Maccabi or not? Let's say you've got like an area which you sometimes go to. Is that Hukaf Ledira or not?
What is a building next to
That's the problem you have to get with the owner of the building or something.
Oh, right, yes.
The block of flats,
Thank you.